Hello and welcome to the Augmentiv think tank. I'm here with Andrea, who runs Hope Tuition Clinic. Is that right?
That is correct,
Um,
yeah.
and you also do something called the Tutors Hive as well. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do?
So, well, I've got fingers in lots of pies, as a lot of people in education appear to have. And my background basically is in English teaching, and I've been an English teacher for 20 years now. And within that time, I have led curriculum areas, diversified and specialised in teacher training, mostly at early career level, as well as doing some CPD around teaching and learning. More latterly, I've moved into consultancy and tuition. So I've worked within multi-academy trusts, advising on teaching and learning, as well as then supported early career teachers nationally with their movement through the early career framework and any support that they need. And alongside that, I've started to bring some of that expertise to teaching and learning training with tutors, as well as having a packed schedule of English tutees myself, and a growing army of English and now maths tutors. So a little bit like a lot of people, it's growing, it moves. It kind of sometimes seems great in this area and not so good in that area. But one of the things I'm trying to do, alongside some collaborations with other people in the industry, is just to, similar to what we were talking about before we came on record, about improving the I suppose the professionalism and the pedagogical approach and the success that tutors have as the demand for it increases as an educational tool alongside mainstream education. So I like to think that my background in mainstream education and still being in schools helps me to transfer some of the wonderful training that you will receive in schools to support, upskill, learn from other tutors.
I think one of the things I find particularly interesting about what you're doing is that you're still on the delivery side. Because I think when we've had conversations in the past, that one of the things that I think we'd agree on is that the pedagogy evolves, it changes over time. What we knew 10, 15 years ago doesn't necessarily work now. The students change, generations change, technology changes. So I think there's something really interesting about actually supporting, because you see this all too much, right? In maybe in other industries more so, but where consultants will come in and they may have had industry expertise in the past, but they don't currently have it right now. They just have what the perspective on the world. But the fact you're still a sort of operator whilst consulting on some of these things, I think is particularly interesting.
Yeah, I think certainly within education, I mean, you could say it like say in any industry, but in education, if you forget what it's like on the shop floor, so to speak, what it's like in the classroom, what it's like in front of students and tutoring, and that constant oscillation, that's a to and fro between teach and reflect. Right, I've done that right. I've not done that right. I need to sort of tweak this. That's where the magic happens as a practitioner, and then that's something that you can then bring not only to your own practice, but certainly from the experience I've had, then to help inform how I support others in improving their practice, because it's about the rising tide lifts all ships. And I find myself in a very fortunate position to have had a wealth of experience within education, and seen the various iterations of the things that people believe is good learning and the things that people don't believe. And I think we are actually, despite press, in a bit of a golden age of understanding how learning works and how we can make education platforms, in whatever delivery it be, from the traditional classroom to other areas. We are better informed than ever in how to do that in the best possible way. And I think tutors can be encouraged by that rather than coming in blind and look to learn from that. The educational research out there now is just brilliant, with some really good minds sort of shaping the way that we learn, and being able to sort of constantly have that interface with me still delivering, still being a practicing teacher and tutor, I think is a real cornerstone to why I feel I'm good at what I do.
Yeah, yeah. I think it is. It's a real sort of USP because you do see people who you see people who make these big sort of career shifts, like they totally overhaul what they're doing and then leave the previous stepping stone behind. And I've always felt I run the tuition businesses myself, but I also still teach myself because I want to keep up with things, and I learn a lot from the student or from trying new tech in an actual lesson rather than just reading about it or doing a demo with a founder or something like that. Um, but thinking about like your journey, what was it that inspired you to become a tutor and then to actually try and support tutors with their pedagogy?
I think it comes from my background in teacher training. Like the idea, similar to letting students improve, is watching practitioners improve, seeing lights go on, and helping people in that sort of traditional sense of the word. To be able to see students as well as teachers improve over the years has been something that, like, sort of puts a light on in me. And sometimes when we're in education, we can get lost a little bit, or in any industry, get lost in, okay, what fires us up? And as time has gone on and my expertise and experience in curriculum management and different areas of education has increased, it's been more and more obvious to me that, okay, I would like to help to make not just students better, but teachers and tutors better. And when things within education, post COVID and before COVID, became increasingly more difficult in terms of the burden of workload, the pace, the overstimulation for me with then a younger family as well, I was looking at a way that I could still sort of support those passions and things that I enjoy, but in an environment that appeared to sap me less when I had to. It's that age old thing that a lot of parents would say, giving more to other people's children in some respects than my own. And tuition helped me to do that. And it was a COVID related thing, really. A lot of my teaching, a lot of the after school tuition I was doing went online, and it suddenly there was like, oh, okay, I could do more of this. And then just gradually, since then, sort of built that. And then again, it's about networking, isn't it? And then the sort of building up sort of contacts within the industry as it's grown since the tuition industry, as it's grown since COVID, to sort of find people that, the connections that you have and the people that value what I've got to say and value my ideas. And I see that as much as there's time and space still within mainstream education to support and develop teachers, there's a lot already in that. And I think that we can take the best of some of the teaching and learning ideas that exist in mainstream education. And for me, as an English specialist, where there's a lot of demand, map that over onto making tutors even better at what they do. As we were saying sort of off air, we were talking about how the barriers to entry for tuitions is low. Anybody can be a tutor. And I think that there is a wave of movement with a lot of organisations to professionalize and make this industry full of integrity and making it sort of a lot better. And I see kind of my role as helping to do that because I've come from an education background.
Yeah, I guess we talked about the fact that that there is a broad spectrum of tutors in terms of how they deliver, in terms of what they deliver, but also in terms of quality of delivery as well. And it makes it quite a hard uh, market for parents to make good decisions. And I think we've seen there's a lot been in the news recently, and things. Places like TTA and QT have talked a lot about perhaps some of the dangers of choosing um, poorly in terms of the tuition that can happen. Um, do you have any advice for parents on what should they look for? How can they make this decision better?
Yeah, I mean, I've written a couple of articles and blogs on this, certainly for magazines more locally to me in Manchester. And a lot of it is about just certain things that and it might be quite controversial to some tutors out there. And I think it depends on what you are looking for in a tutor, first of all. That's the main caveat. Some people are looking for support, something that might be a little bit more in terms of softer skills. But I certainly think when it comes to, I suppose, the bulk of the industry, which is about examination support for students maybe who are doing GCSEs, A levels, moving up through those kind of areas, certainly having a vast knowledge of the curriculum and of the examination system, having to been examiners, having that qualified teacher experience, for me is a huge discriminator. And again, the caveat is that for some people, the support that they get from somebody who is not qualified as a teacher, but they might have had years of tuition experience and be superb subject practitioners, is great. And I think that there is a place in tuition for every sort of kind of tutor that there is, and it's that malleability of tuition versus teaching that attracts a lot of people, not only to be in it, but also parents and children as well. The first thing I often say, even with an educational background, in my welcome emails to parents is, this is not school. And I think that it's really important that we, as much as we have that Venn diagram cross with schooling, that we make it very clear that we are approaching things differently. So I think it's about what you want, essentially, in parents, knowing what they want from a tutor, and that being made very clear by maybe the tutors themselves, so that there's no grey area. For me, my main market is GCSE and A level. So the tutors that I have that have started working for me more recently, as well as myself, have to have a certain level of in-school experience or examining experience. And at the minute, it's very, very difficult for tutors to come up to that level because of for example, exam boards only will require certain people to have taught in a school. They have to have qualified teacher status. They have to have taught the exam spec for a certain amount of years or terms, and that then means that certain barriers to improvement for tutors is hard. It's hard for them to kind of find and I suppose arrive at that kind of mythical QTS style badge that a lot of people like me have worked hard to get and have hard to develop. So the shortcut for me is I would not go with, my own children have had tutors, I would not go with a tutor that hasn't got some form of qualified teacher status. It's a badge of expertise. Having gone through a huge amount of training in my early and mid-career and late career, that's all in every lesson. And I think that's, I don't want that to be diluted just because there are a lot of people in the industry that don't have it. I think it's still a badge of excellence. It doesn't necessarily mean, as we were saying off air, that qualified teachers are the best teachers, but it is a good standard bearer for parents. Obviously, the DBS thing that seems to have been in the press a lot is for me, and it's like a non-negotiable. You have to have QTS. I certainly think increasingly being a member of a supportive organisation, not just for your own benefit, but for teachers to be able, for parents, sorry, to be able to see that either you've got, we've talked about them, organisations like Qualified Tutor, like the TTA, that offer. Certainly, TTA offer really good sort of support for the tutor as well. If you are struggling in certain areas, how to make yourself compliant in certain areas, I think is really useful for parents. And also then tutors feel that they've got some support for them. And as well as these organisations offer certain help in continued professional development. And I think though there's certain badges, if you like, of either achievement or membership that I think are becoming a little more and more recognised by parents, or they need to be in that sense, so that we don't get these kind of red flag moments that we've had where we've seen DBS or a lack of DBS becoming an issue with parents, with tutors. And I think we've got to demystify what parents expect or what they assume. That's the key thing, what they assume that a tutor has as well. And I think a lot of them just assume that they're qualified and they're not. And I think as well, now everybody's got a digital footprint. So check reviews. Check, what parents have said. They're usually the best people. It's still a word of mouth industry for a lot of people. But obviously within that, word of mouth is great. But I would often be saying, okay, what are your credentials? Are you DBS checked? What is your experience in teaching? How long have you been doing this? Have you got any results of any students? The caveat with that is we often see them once, maybe twice a week. So we are not as capable of building those results compared to schools. But I still think that you've got that kind of For me, that that triangulation of experience, being safe online, and also having the testimonials, that should be kind of the three main points of I suppose of differentiation and discrimination for a parent wanting a tutor.
Yeah, I think that
Long-winded, but I think I've
no, I
got.
think that that's super interesting, and it hits the nail on the head. I think of kind of my view, even coming from a point of view where actually most of the businesses I have run have not had the majority as QTS teachers, and the sort of first thing that it springs to mind is that you mentioned about being an examiner, but I guess as you said, not all QTS not all teachers actually end up going on to become an examiner. And I think, just as we said earlier, there's a variety in quality in the tuition sector. I think we both agree there's a variety in quality in the teaching sector, and we often get parents who come to us and say, you know, look, I really don't want a teacher because I'm having a problem with a teacher, and I need a different approach. So sometimes actually it can be an asset. I can see it obviously like having that watermark. It is really the only shorthand that we have at the minute to say the chance I'm going to take on this is probably this is going to be a good tutor, right? With QTS, if they're an examiner, you could probably say it even more. Um, but the first thing that springs to mind is just having those conversations with parents who say, you know, I don't want a QDS because it's different, and then that brings us to, you know, that teaching is very different to tutoring. Do you think there are significantly more transferable skills that come from your, let's say, not someone who's gone on to senior leadership or gone on to even to be an examiner, but from just someone with that QTS badge? Do they have a much a higher starting point than a tutor coming from, say, industry or even like a recent graduate tutor, someone coming straight out of their degree? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, two things. I think it's really important. Like I said, the caveat I said at the beginning is it depends on what the teacher, this parent is looking for. And I think that's really important. If they're not looking for a teacher, and some of them aren't because of certain reasons why they're coming to a tuition, I think that's really important to make that clear. It's just because my market is specifically based on examinations, that kind of knowledge is something that I kind of need. With regards to the transferable skills, one of the things that I think does make teachers stand apart from tutors is that quality of CPD that we have had in training, either with if you go through a PGC or you go through an ITT route, in the science of learning, how people learn, pedagogy, how to structure curriculums, how to structure lessons so that you are getting the best out of the learning experience for the student. Now, me included, it's been very, very recently since sort of this idea about the science of learning and cognitive science has become transferred into teaching in a huge, in like a game changing way. So I would even admit that even at the start of my career in teaching 20 years ago, I might have been planning things that went against how the brain learns and how the brain acquires knowledge compared to what I would have been doing more latterly. So I think teaching gives practitioners that grounding in planning things and delivering things that are going to benefit retention of knowledge, learning, performance, whatever market it is that you are in, versus perhaps coming in from a non-qualified perspective where, unbeknownst to you, because again we talked off air, didn't we, about the unawares, the incompetence. You're not knowing what you don't know. So a lot of tutors may come in and think, yes, I can teach maths because I know how to break it down. I know what I'm doing. And I think definitely that might work. My friend's son does it. He helps some people in years 6 and 7 with it. But even when I've had conversations with him about that, there are certain things that he's doing that are actively kind of undoing learning. And one of the things that I try and do with the WhatsApp group that I have with Arthur Moore is trying to tap into those research backed sort of and scientific studies that show that actually we do need to pay attention to what teachers are taught in how to teach and how to make sure that what they do is retained and learnt. And so sometimes I think unless teachers and tutors are aware of that, what they might be doing could be negating and actually undoing learning. And I think within tuition, there is a real space for tutors to engage and enjoy learning about how the brain learns. What are the best ways I can teach my subject? You might be a graduate, you might have, sort of a PhD from a great university, but unless the actual practice of teaching that is something that you are well schooled in, then you might actually be having, without realizing it, an adverse effect on the learning capability of that student.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I guess you mentioned earlier like being part of a community like TTA or QT. I mean, it would be good to see that become a sort of not compulsory, but a sort of industry standard, a good signal to parents that this tutor is likely to be serious about their CPD, and then even take that one step further and say that the things like that you're doing with trying to improve with the pedagogy WhatsApp channel, as you said, and the work that people like Arthur are doing, trying to raise standards in that pedagogy. I wonder if that would in time shift the focus to be actually it's not what you necessarily have done in the past. It's not necessarily the fact that you had QTS 5 years ago or you were in a school a few years ago. It's actually like what are you doing? How can you showcase what you're doing right now to keep up with what's happening right now? And I wonder whether that's the thing we should be working towards, that shift towards everyone who is tutoring full time has is no longer doing it in a school for the most part, or at least not in the same way they used to be, whether they're QTS or not. And so I wonder then whether that we need to promote these ideas of like continuing this pedagogy journey for everyone.
I fundamentally agree with that. I think the way that education is moving and morphing, you're going to have educators, it could be like myself, that wear lots of different hats, doing lots of different things. And I think constantly, even though I've been saying it, harking back to QTS, it is not really helping where these alternative parts of education are moving towards. And whilst that's still a standard bearer for me, I completely agree with you. And I don't necessarily say that has to be the case in the future. I think that there has to be more maybe in these alternative spaces like tuition, where tutors themselves come in and realize if I am going to be good at what I do, it's not about maybe my bottom line and how to become a better tutor, how to win groups, how to improve my presence online. Those obviously are important parts of the vehicle of being a tutor. But unless the engine of what you're doing, listen to the English teacher with my metaphors, unless the engine of what you're doing is sound and it's in good working order, and that is kind of the way that you teach and how you can sort of plan a series of sessions to get results, how you can use retrieval, all these things that are embedded and baked into teachers' practice. That's the sort of thing that needs to be transferred, I think, with a lot more urgency. And also, as you were saying, almost being one of the main windows that makes a tutor a good tutor, whether you've got QTS or not. A lot of people that have been in teaching for a long time can become institutionalized to the point that they've got bad habits, just as much as tutors who have maybe a lack of teaching expertise. I sometimes think that they're the ones that are the most malleable and willing to say, okay, well, I didn't know that this really aids cognition and this aids learning, and that I need to space out the way I teach certain things, and I need to sort of scaffold, the way I teach. And those are fundamental pedagogical, approaches that actively embed learning. And I think that tutors are becoming a lot more aware that needs to be as front and center in their development of their business as much as, say, their subject knowledge or their ability to advertise online. And I think it's, as you said, it's about bringing that idea of practice, even for established tutors, more to the front of of the profession, I think.
I think this will be ultimately the thing that causes independent tutoring, so tutoring outside of an agency and outside of a company, to grow a lot more. Because I often see having more come at this from the running tuition businesses than really strictly being an independent tutor myself. The parents often trust the brand. They trust my team's ability to recruit people who are good, and that's what gives them that badge of honor. The fact that every time they've had someone or they've been recommended by someone, they know that we're good at choosing, and that's obviously a luxury you have as a company. You can just interview 100 tutors, and it doesn't matter what their background is. You just pick the two or the three that you need that are good and that are going to be good. Um, and I guess, and that's why sort of I think traditionally parents are sort of funneled through companies. It just gives them that security. But with obviously, I think about, you mentioned COVID earlier, and the way the world has slightly changed post COVID, and people are moving a lot more into this sort of, don't want to say gig economy, but that sort of idea where people are running their own self-employment and things like this. You could see, obviously, tuition is a great thing for people to do. And if you don't just want to default to working for someone else's business, having these badges of honor is surely the thing that will eventually make, even if we said earlier off air that perhaps the demand as is not quite educated enough yet on the sort of on what the industry is like, let's say, and what they can get from different tutors. But that will change with time and with tutors pushing the boundaries. So it's sort of, me advice to tutors today would be like, get ahead of the curve. If it's not a requirement right now, a few people are going to see it as, I'm going to promote this about myself because it will give me an edge. And then eventually parents will figure this out, that that's the thing that gives you the edge. And then they'll only look for that. So there could be a point to get ahead of the curve right now.
There is, and I think one difference with what we are in here is an industry that's very, very price dependent as well. Education, traditionally has not had a price attached to it, so you can have the luxury of talking about the best practitioner for this or the best for that. And so a lot of what we have to accept is that there are certain price points that parents want to pay and are able to pay, and sometimes that then sees on some forums a race to the bottom, people charging 5, 10, 15 pounds an hour for expertise or demanding expertise that they're not going to get for that price. And so I think that when you've got a price point for parents as well, I think being able to justify that and get that Goldilocks spot again of expertise, training, these badges of competence, if you like, and expertise has to match up with the price point as well. And I think there's a bit of a wild west in that still, in that you can get people coming in and they might offer 15 pounds an hour as a graduate, and that might work. As we were saying, it depends what the parent wants, and I think it's about educating parents in their options to for the best part, for their student, for their child, sorry. And I think that we've got so many different pathways now compared to the traditional, I need a bit of support for my child to get through GCSE. Tuition now and home learning has just exploded, and there are so many different pathways around which parents want their child to learn that then muddies the waters a little bit as well. There's a lot more dilution in how you can deliver and what parents and children might want. They might want, as you were saying, even with your own business, that can morph into a hybrid model, or it can morph into sort of a asynchronous model. And parents are still trying to sort of find out the best price version, the best expertise, the best delivery for their children, in amongst the conversations that we are having about tutor expertise. And so there's lots of different levels, I suppose, where the floor is moving constantly for tutors. And how do you then pinpoint your expertise and your niche and what you can provide in to a field that's where the ground is constantly moving, because parents are looking for different things at different times. And as you're saying, you find yourself going in one direction with your delivery that you might not have anticipated. So it depends how you look at it. It's an exciting time to be in this industry. but also it's quite discombobulating in that we don't often know. Certainly this year is a very different landscape for me as an educator compared to last year, and I imagine next year even more so. And I think it's a lot of it is about being comfortable with the uncomfortable, whether that be as a solo business owner thinking, am I going to get my money coming in again next year? Or whether it be about what's the best way to deliver? How can I promote myself? What do I need? What's the landscape requiring of me? And I think we have to be comfortable perhaps with that and not demand maybe too much from ourselves and from others, and be patient with parents who might not know what they're looking for either, as well as with tutors who might not be aware of what they need and what they don't need. And I think if you are committed to your area of expertise and what you think you can provide, it's like we were saying earlier, and you've got that voice and you've got that drive and that consistency, it will make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there that's interesting. I mean, the first thing you were talking about, the sort of race to the bottom and prices. Um, I always look at these because you see these sort of giants in the tuition industry that are well beyond your typical sort of tuition, let's say a tuition business that does pretty well and maybe has a few international offices and things like that. And we obviously see a few of those, but then you look at something like Go Student. I don't know if you've come across Go Student before. They got a huge amount of funding. They're the biggest tuition company in Europe. I think they originally started in Germany. And they advertise that the tuition is something like it can be as low as like £15 per hour. And so I became really interested in this like what is happening here. So I conducted an experiment. I've recorded it. I might actually post it at some point, where I said I was an adult learner looking to resit my maths A level. So I picked a subject that I normally teach, that I know well, and just to see what would happen. And I like put down my hypothesis to begin with. I wrote it down and I said, I think I'm going to get someone who's currently at university, doesn't have an awful lot of time to spend on me, and will likely just like open up a past paper and just walk me through some questions. And so, yes, I get a message a few minutes before. I'm 15 minutes late, so I'm just coming out my lecture and I'm, blah, 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 fine, whatever. I got on the lesson, and yeah, lo and behold, go through a past paper. But two of the things I'm taught wrong, like, and I think teachers make mistakes. I've definitely made a mistake in a lesson or like mixed up my words or something, but I will always I'll own up to it, especially if a teacher, that classic, I'm just testing you, and then we go back and then we do it like, um, but this guy doubled down because he obviously didn't want to be embarrassed. And I had to play it dumb like I didn't really know, but I was kind of like, it just doesn't feel right to me. Like, there's got to be, what about this and what about that? And he sort of doubled down. And I thought that is quite a rookie mistake. But that's from the biggest tuition provider in Europe.
And that kind of echoes some of the things I've been saying about integrity and expertise and professionalism. And just because something is big and successful doesn't necessarily mean it works particularly well. Um, I think that kind of echoes with a lot of the politics we see at the minute as well. Um, I think that certainly a lot of the people that I've connected with the with the most amount of experience, commitment to individual students has been those solo tutors. I've been in the sort of this kind of online game now since COVID, and that doesn't seem like very long. It's been like 4 or 5 years, probably 3 years since my business sort of was properly established, and I took kind of more of a step back from teaching. And there's still so many new people coming in. It's still quite young as a landscape, hence why I was saying that it's constantly shifting. And I think that parents are, navigating something that is really, really tricky. And I think that there needs to be a lot of support for them to make that right decision. And again, things that I'm quite passionate about, which is not undoing learning from the example that you've just given me, and about tutors being the next step, I think, for a lot of tutors in this space is to improve their own practice. And it's very, very difficult. It tends to take a back seat, that either because I've been in schools and I know what I'm doing. But often teachers realize that they still need to be upskilling. But a lot of it is, I've got to get more students. I've got the admin to do. I've got to be in the business doing my teaching. And that means that the sort of the commitment to something that doesn't necessarily have a bottom line outcome baked in is often something that tutors might not find the time or the money to do. And I certainly think when we talk to certainly conversations that I've had with Julia at QT, there is a, sometimes felt in the last few years Julie was ahead of where tutors were in terms of what she saw as being needed within the tutoring sphere for that certain element of integrity, credentials, qualifications, that that a lot of tutors haven't got the time or maybe don't see the need to be able to have. And because there is no industry standard like there is in mainstream education, it becomes difficult for tutors fairly new to the industry to work out, well, what do I need to be doing? Because it always seems like everyone's got an agenda or that somebody wants to make money from something. And as I said to you off air, that education is fundamentally still in an industry of integrity, about improving life chances, and learning gains for young people or adults, depending on what you're in. And I still think that stands. And we need to hear more voices about that rather than, you were saying, flashy sort of ideas that people have or flashy things that they're trying to promote. It's about maintaining that integrity about what makes you good at what you do in front of the student that you have. And obviously there are business administration and promotional features that help to tick that along, but ultimately we're only as good as our last lesson. And I think that's or as good as our next lesson. And I think that needs to be something that we can come together as a community to value. And I have great conversations in things like my English Tutors Hive that I've been doing, which it's been a bit up and down. Obviously, we're busy and I've not had as many lovely conversations as I'd like to. But that kind of conversation about how do we teach this better? How can, I bring what I've done to help tutors be better? And I've had some wonderful kind of feedback from tutors that I have worked with. And I know Charlotte Watson won't mind me saying that, she's done a bit of work with me and gone, oh my God, I love this. I'm still using this. This has revolutionized what I do. And those kind of connections are really important, I think, for students to make with each other as so many of us operate in a silo, but certainly for us to see the value of how our practice and our business improves because we are better in front of the students. So I feel that we are getting there with it, as you were saying to me off air, but I think we've still got to try and, just as you were saying, keep beating the drum about what we think is important for tutors to become better at what it is they do every day.
Yeah, I think you said a word at the beginning there that sort of struck with me then, was just commitment. And that's a very hard thing to actually to showcase. We're often showcasing qualifications that we've done. We're showcasing things. It's very, think about your LinkedIn profile. A lot of it is historical, but we're moving now into this world of content, of producing things here and now to show that you are committed to whatever's driving you here and now. And I think that's the thing that's got to be showcased, right? Because regardless of what you've got prior to this, if you are committed to being better, that should be a driving force to support the children, right?
Absolutely. And being consistent with that commitment as well, constantly showing up to be better. There is a bit of a education and teaching is a little bit thankless like that. You're never there. You're never good enough. There's always, and you've either got to thrive on that ability that I can be better next session than I was in the previous session, or that can be something that is quite hard to accept. After 20 years of doing it, I will be better. I'm better this year in my delivery of my lessons than I was last year. I'm learning something new, and scouring my landscape for more ways to improve. And I think it is sort of that commitment to being better in the future, either in some way in your business, and and realizing that a year is a long time, even though the academic year is quite short. We are still, there's huge things happening every year within education that I think we need to be kind of aware of, observe, some things we can get on board with. But I think for tutors, being a consistent voice in what you do, showing up, committing to that, helps you to become a presence, I think, in a community that, as we were saying, is quite diluted and there's so many different people. To have a voice, I think you've got to show that you are committed to, like you're saying, what we've got, what the future holds, and what you are trying to do to build that, as much as where you've come from.
But thinking about the future, I mean, one of the things that got me, you talked about the pandemic earlier, and I think everyone talks about this pandemic, it's this big turning point. It's obviously this big, huge thing for humanity that happened. But I think I remember in sort of maybe the maybe not quite the early days, but sort of middling through the pandemic, the idea of what this would do to education was sort of full of promise. I think there was a lot of ideas that this was going to be the shake-up that, as Ken Robinson would say, like takes us out of the industrial age type education that we're in. I think maybe that's always been a rhetoric that I've sort of partly believed, but maybe not quite to that extreme, because you do see these small incremental changes, and then if you were to reflect back, quite back to the industrial revolution, there are a lot of things that are different, and there has been an evolution. But do you think, do you think that the pandemic really has had as big of an impact as people thought it would? And then B, do you think things like AI, which is the sort of new thing that's supposed to be shaking this up, will have that impact?
I think AI will be a bit of a catalyst. It's interesting you say that. Just more and more I'm using it latterly, just I'd say in the last couple of months, it's starting to really filter in more to the way I approach my teaching and how I use it with students as a tool, and upskilling myself in how it can help me. I think it is going to be a game changer for teachers and tutors. I think it is going to help us with sort of shortcut a lot of expertise and information, the speed, and I suppose the way certainly large language models are going to help create more accuracy in terms of content and in terms of voice and delivery, I think are going to help that. I was just reading a paper that Carl Hendrick popped on LinkedIn yesterday about large language models are getting so much better at being able to produce what a teacher is asking them to do, that the quality of the lesson plans that are coming out of AI are actually outstripping or beginning to outstrip sometimes some of the things that are being produced by experienced teachers. So the computers, in that dystopian way, are learning, and they're learning fast, and LLMs I think are going to be a big game changer for our industry, and being able to manage that and manage how we prompt and how we create and help AI to learn with us, I think is going to be really, really useful. And there's already more and more apps, more and more add-ons that are coming through AI that I think we need to be informed in. And I think that's kind of I think that's going to be a big catalyst for change. Education's massive though. And I've had conversations with heads who are still obviously in the mainstream system. And I've said, despite this dilution of pathways within that we're saying parents and students are coming into education, it's like turning a tank around in the Suez. It takes time. There's lots. It's like a 1,000,000 point turn to even do anything. And I think rather than a revolution, it's an organic evolution in that sense. And I think we will have, like with any change, areas of rapid change, like we've had kind of post COVID. But again, it's left. I keep coming back to that metaphor of the ground shifting. I think it's going to be years, not months, before we see a complete sort of volte-face in how education is done. Purely not just from an education perspective and like students identifying with how education can help them, but certainly how families can navigate that as well. Traditionally students went to school so that parents could earn, and so you're looking at education not just being delivered in a different way because it's what students need, but society has to shift to adapt to how new education and new learning might look, and how a lot of what students are learning about, like, it's that strap line, isn't it? A lot of the jobs that students are doing don't exist, or what they will be doing don't exist. And how do we plan for that future that is still moving? And I think it's time, and it's us being patient with that and being able to see what might need to be done. But then you look at the education system and it's sort of baked in treacle, and it's going to take time and money, of which, sort of like you said, it's not an industry sloshing around in money to be able to do that. And the margins that we see with schools like yourselves, other schools, other independent tutors, home learning taking off, is starting to impact on that. But we've still got to sort of change the whole system, and that's massive. That takes a huge amount of time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you point to the sort of practical problems of it as well, because yeah, there's, I mean, we've met many parents who've, worried about the element of childcare that exists with schooling that just allows them to not have to be at home. But then on the flip side of that, you've got reports particularly in the UK, of people saying working from home more has caused people, kids are not turning up on a Friday because the parents are keeping them home because they're at home, which
That's
is,
rubbish. That's rubbish.
what do you think about that?
It's right. It's a soundbite, isn't it? It's an easy kind of headline grabber, as being, again, I talked about the complexity of trying to change a system. And so because of that, you've got complexity of issues that are affecting that system to break down. And work from home parents is just one of them. I work from home, I'd say over the last 3 years, several days a week on and off. It hasn't impacted on my children's ability to want to or not want to go to school. And I think that it's a very facile way to say that, oh, this is the main problem. We all like something to grab onto. And the problem with education is that there's too many spiky areas that seem to crop up and cause an issue, and then the other one does. And that's not good news. It's messy. We want something that we can grab onto and identify with. And that's just a cheap shot, when actually the problems of, well, not so much problems, but also solutions of education are just much more multifaceted than that, in my view.
No, well, I think that's a super interesting point, and yeah, you see this all the time. I've always had an issue with like science in the news, because they seem to boil down a very complicated research study into something that is headline grabbing, and then people will come back and say, shopping is more likely to give you cancer or something like that. How have you linked these things from this study? And I think we definitely see that in education. People want like a simple answer, and it's way more nuanced than that. But that's part of its complication. I think it's partly because it's so personalized, right? There are as many ways to learn as there are people on the planet. And so like, how do you deliver some sort of mass education system that does cater to everyone, but when it's got to be personalized? And I think that's the real challenge of things. But thinking about, I guess we're sort of coming to an end now. I guess I'll leave us with a question that's been on my mind for a while about AI. So AI, I've used AI for a long time now. But one of the things I see it doing really well is it gives people a voice. So I think it gives people who traditionally wouldn't have made content, or wouldn't have posted something on LinkedIn, or wouldn't have done something like that. It gives them the ability to communicate, or give them the confidence to communicate their ideas. And I think that is potentially really interesting. I feel like it's going to help me learn more. Um, but we also see these things where we're saying, I see a lot of advertisements for AI tutors. I see a lot of that popping up. I know there's a tutorial college in the UK. I think David Game they've got a program that's entirely AI sort of generated and based. They have facilitators that make sure you're doing your work, but the course is AI, called Saberwing. And I mean, there is, I guess, underlying that, the theory is AI will allow the personalized education that the mass education system can't do. I mean, will schools end up becoming a thing of the past? Will we learn in an entirely different way in the future? What do you think?
we will learn in an entirely different way. I think we need to learn in an entirely different way. We can't look at subjects in silos anymore. I think the way that, it's like when you see any kind of revolution that's happening in society, it's very easy when you look 100 years in the future to say, oh, this trend happened and this happened and this happened. And you can see them as a cause and effect. When you're living through a revolution, which we are, I think, it's often really difficult to see how that outcome is going to look. The Industrial Revolution was the same. There was a lot of upheaval, a lot of poverty, there was a lot of social instability, there was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of optimism. You've got all of these kind of contradictory sort of, I suppose, motives and feelings at any given point. And so I think it's not, it sounds a bit of a cop out, but I can't really see into the future. All I can see is, as somebody who works within schools, who's got children in secondary school and college, and who works as well in alternative ways of providing education, that it does need to change. I don't come across many children in schools who enjoy being in school anymore in that traditional environment. And so it might be that this generation, Gen Z and maybe a little bit of Gen Alpha, are the ones that, when they leave education, are the ones that shape that. We need to be doing something different. We're yet to see the impact that COVID and AI and social media is having on this, this generation, this digitalization of a generation. That will be when they are adults and they are shaping the world that comes maybe beneath them. We're this kind of transition generation, I feel, that are always trying, oh, well, I need to be looking at that. I think we're not living through it. I'm an analog teenager. I grew up in the real world. And so there's a lot of this that I feel that is going to pass me by and probably pass a lot of us by. So I think there's a lot of panic about it. But it's like I come back to being comfortable with the uncomfortable in any industry, but certainly in education, because it's huge. We've just got to go with our guts, see how it works. I think there is room for personalized education and fusion of ideas and self-teaching. But there is never, ever going to be a substitute for the informed, intelligent, direct instruction that comes from an expert in front of you. And what people forget is that you depersonalize learning by doing that. I learn best at school, and again, I'm harking back to my kind of 20th century schooling, but I learn best, and certainly the students that I have learn best because of the person who is imparting the knowledge, because of the person who is teaching them. And I think we need to remind ourselves of the importance of that, and that other areas, whether it be training, whether it be AI, are tools to enable us to still create that personal connection with learning, whether it was thousands of years ago where an elder in a village would teach the younger generation in how to defend themselves from attack, or whatever element it is, or how to weave and things like that. We still need that element. There's an element of personal and societal integration that comes from learning and education that I think we dispense of at our peril. That human interface is just always going to mean that is the bread and butter of what education is all about.
I guess it's a truly educator's point of view to point to the fact that it is the next generation that is likely to grab this ball and run with it and make the big changes. If you were speaking to someone who let's say is from that generation, or will be in the future, who will then move into tutoring, will see tutoring as the career that they want to get involved with, do you have any advice for them?
So sort of just be open. Never off duty really when you run your own business, or you are in the business of education. The people who are doing the teaching are always the learners as well. And I'd always say be open to opportunities, and hopefully don't pigeonhole yourself as just a tutor or a teacher. I think what we're finding is the kind of portfolio career that people have now, where they move and they do a little bit of this, they do a little bit of that, they do a little bit of this, and they tend to have fingers in several pies. And I think that is going to be the norm, and there's going to be a lot of organic growth in people's careers rather than the career for life that we might have seen in sort of the 20th century. There are still industries that need that and require that. Education may still being one of them. But I think that my advice for anybody wanting to get into tuition is just be prepared to be the learner as well as the teacher, because otherwise that you're not understanding what education is all about.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to leave us on. I mean, we talked earlier about transferable skills, and we often think, especially when we're having this QTS sort of debate, but people from industry bring such interesting transferable skills to education, but also the transferable skill of being able to educate or to teach other people is great for industry as well. It's a two-way street, you know. I know people that have started as teachers or tutors and then gone on, and that's been one of the things that's bagged them a career that they were really passionate about, because it's ultimately communication, right? Communication of ideas.
The best teachers are the ones that enthuse learning and that have got those skills that employers say they want from from Gen Z. They want them to be, I hate that people call it soft skills, but they want them to be able to communicate. We were talking off air, weren't we, about having difficult conversations well with people, being able to coach and improve and support people without, sort of threat. I always say that my teaching approach is high warmth, high boundaries, and high expectations, and I think that it's about sort of having those sort of skills that I think are going to make people not just good teachers, but transferable into the digital world, the AI world that again depersonalizes a lot of industries. I think you will stand out if you are approachable, knowledgeable, sort of compassionate, empathetic, all these human qualities that appear to be sidelined a little bit more when we talk about the digitalization of the world.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, this is the thing that the human element still brings to the table and will always bring to the table. So very interesting. I mean, I wish we could continue the conversation, but really, really interesting insights from you there. Thank you so much for offering to be a part of this.
I've
Um,
loved it. All I know
yeah,
is we like a good chat.
yeah, for sure. And I'm sure we will catch up again in the future. It'll be interesting to maybe look into the next academic year and see how things panned out. I think the rate at which technology is changing at the minute is quite fast. We'll probably all be using something different in 6 months' time.
Yeah, you never know. I know it's exhausting as well, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, that is now you really have to be the true learner. You have to keep learning a new app. Well, thank you so much, and yeah, thanks for being part of the podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.